There are days that announce themselves as important: weddings, funerals, graduations, days you circle on a calendar, days you expect to remember. This wasn't one of them, at least not in the beginning. It was an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day that disappears into the background of a person's life. I left work at 5, stopped for gas, bought coffee I didn't really need, listened to half a podcast before turning it off. Nothing unusual, nothing memorable. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. That wasn't surprising. My wife, Hannah, often arrived home a little after me, usually 10 minutes, sometimes 20, never much longer. I unlocked the front door, dropped my keys on the hallway table, and began moving through the familiar rhythm of the evening. Jacket off, coffee down, shoes by the door, lights on, silence. The silence was the only thing that felt different. Not alarming, just noticeable, like walking into a room where someone had recently been speaking. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, no explanation. At 6:18 p.m., I sent Hannah a text. "Everything okay?" No response. At 6:41 p.m., I sent another. Still nothing. Normally, that wouldn't bother me. But Hannah always replied. Not eventually. Not later. Always. Even if she was busy. Even if she could only send one word. By 7 o'clock, dinner sat untouched on the stove. And for the first time that evening, I felt uneasy. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. I opened the door, expecting a neighbor. Instead, I found a man I had never seen before. He looked to be in his 60s. Gray coat, polished shoes, a calm expression. The kind of face you instantly know you'll remember later. He wasn't holding a package, or a clipboard, or a phone. He was holding an envelope. "Daniel?" he asked. I nodded, cautiously. Without another word, he extended the envelope toward me. My name was written across the front. Not printed, handwritten. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Hannah's. The world seemed to pause, just for a second. "What is this?" I asked. The man glanced at the envelope, then back at me. "Your wife asked me to deliver it." He hesitated. If she was late. Late, such a small word. Yet suddenly it felt much larger, much heavier. My eyes moved back to the envelope. "When did she give this to you?" I asked. 5 days ago." I felt my stomach tighten. 5 days ago. The man seemed to understand the question forming in my mind. "She said there was a good chance you'd never see it." The evening air suddenly felt colder. "What do you mean?" He smiled sadly. Not the smile of someone hiding information. The smile of someone carrying information. "That answer is inside." I looked down at the envelope again. The paper felt strangely heavy in my hands, as though it contained something much larger than a letter. When I looked up, the man was already stepping away from the porch. "Wait," he stopped. "Who are you?" For the first time he smiled. A real smile. An old promise. Then he walked away. I stood frozen in the doorway, holding an envelope my wife had prepared nearly a week ago. An envelope she never mentioned. An envelope she apparently hoped I would never need. Slowly, I turned it over. Written on the back, in Hannah's handwriting, were 7 words that instantly made my heart pound. "Please read this before you call me." And for the first time all evening, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was inside. For almost a full minute, I didn't open the envelope. I simply stood in the kitchen with it resting on the table. The clock ticked, the stove clicked softly as it cooled. Outside, a car passed the house. Everything felt normal, which somehow made the situation feel even stranger. Most people think fear comes from knowing something bad. In my experience, Fear usually comes from not knowing anything at all, from standing between two possibilities and realizing either one could change your life. I sat down, pulled the envelope closer, and finally opened it. Inside wasn't a long letter. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a legal document. In fact, the first thing I found was a photograph. A very old photograph. The edges were worn. The colors had faded. The picture showed a much younger Hannah standing beside an older man. Both were smiling. Both looked happy. I immediately recognized Hannah. I didn't recognize the man. Behind the photograph was a single folded page. I unfolded it and began reading. Daniel, if you're reading this, then I'm probably running late, and knowing you, you're already imagining the worst. I smiled despite myself. That was exactly what I had been doing. Before you panic, let me tell you something I've wanted to tell you for years. My eyes moved lower. The man in the photo is my grandfather. I frowned. That surprised me. Hannah rarely talked about her grandfather. In fact, I couldn't remember her mentioning him more than once or twice during our entire marriage. I continued reading. When I was 19, he gave me a piece of advice. He told me that life becomes dangerous when people wait too long to say important things. The words felt simple, but something about them made me keep reading carefully. For years, I've carried a promise I made to him. A promise that one day I'd stop postponing difficult conversations. I looked back at the photograph, then at the letter. Suddenly, this didn't feel like a mystery anymore. It felt personal, very personal. 5 days ago, she wrote, I met someone from my grandfather's past. He reminded me of something I should have done a long time ago. The next paragraph was much shorter, only one sentence. I've spent too much time assuming you already know how much you've changed my life. I stopped reading, not because I wanted to, because I needed a moment. The room suddenly felt different, quieter, warmer. For the first time all evening, the tension began to disappear. I continued. You know every version of me? The confident version, the stubborn version, the version that pretends everything is fine, and the version that's terrified when things aren't. You've stayed through all of them. I swallowed hard. The next page wasn't dramatic. There were no shocking revelations, no hidden secrets, no betrayals. Instead, it contained memories. The apartment where we first lived, the terrible couch we couldn't afford to replace, the road trip where we got lost for 6 hours, the rainy night our car broke down, the mornings we spent laughing over absolutely nothing, moment after moment, memory after memory. Things I hadn't thought about in years. Then came the final paragraph. If you're reading this because I'm late, please don't worry. Life is unpredictable. Traffic exists. Meetings run long. Flights get delayed. But if something ever prevented me from saying these things out loud, I wanted you to hear them anyway. You have been the best part of my life. And I never want gratitude to become something I forgot to express. Love, Hannah. I slowly lowered the letter. For several moments, I just sat there, thinking. All evening I had expected a secret, a scandal, a problem, a revelation. Instead, I had received something far rarer. Honesty. The kind people often postpone because they assume there will always be another opportunity later. My phone rang. Hannah. I answered immediately. Hey, she said. I know I'm late. I laughed. A genuine laugh. The first one all evening. I got your envelope. Silence. Then a nervous voice. Oh, you read it? Yeah. Another pause. That's embarrassing. I smiled. Not even a little. She laughed softly. I wasn't sure I'd ever give it to you. Then why write it? Her answer came instantly. Because some things deserve to be said before they're needed. An hour later, she finally came home. No dramatic explanations, no emergencies, no hidden mysteries, just traffic, a delayed meeting, and a woman standing in the doorway looking slightly embarrassed that her carefully written letter had actually been delivered. That night, the envelope remained on the kitchen table. Not because I forgot to put it away, because every time I looked at it, I remembered something important. The most meaningful words people leave behind aren't always goodbye messages. Sometimes, they're simply the things they've been meaning to say all along.